So we had good news and bad news with vaccines today. The good, that 2 new vaccines have performed well in tests. The bad news, the EU has escalated its legal battle with the British-Swedish vaccine maker AstraZeneca and is threatening to prevent vaccines crossing from the EU to the UK. There is no daily update on the number of deaths in the latest 24-hour government figures, owing to what they described as processing issues. But the figures do show that there have been more than 29,000 new cases in the UK. More than 440,000 people received their first dose of a COVID vaccine yesterday, and that means that 7.89 million people have now received their first dose. Fasma Manji reports.
In October, we filmed volunteers in Bradford taking part in Novavax trials. Today came positive news that these trials show the vaccine is 89% effective overall and, crucially, works against the new UK mutation of the virus.
So 7% of our total recruits were from the BAME community. We reached out to their local channels, the family groups, the WhatsApp groups. We were very keen that we had a diverse population take part in our trial. And we also had a diverse section of ages as well. So we had lots of participants who were 80 plus.
And perhaps the most exciting thing is that you have evidence that it works on the mutations. Can you talk us through that?
The evidence suggests that it has a total efficacy of 89.3%, but the initial results certainly show that it has close to an 85% efficacy against the the UK variant of the coronavirus. It may be purely timing on when the trial conducted itself, because the other trials took place a bit earlier and the variants came to light probably much later.
Vaccines Minister Nadhim Zahawi was also a Novavax trial volunteer. If approved by the regulator, Novavax would become the 4th vaccine in use in the UK. And 60 million doses to be manufactured in Teesside have already been pre-secured. Over on the continent, President Macron told reporters the findings on the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine weren't encouraging for people older than 65. Just hours later, the European Medicines Agency approved the vaccine, with no restrictions on using the jab for older people.
The recommendation to approve the AstraZeneca vaccine is based on data that shows that the vaccine offers protection against COVID-19 with a reassuring safety profile.
But it comes amid a fierce dispute between the European Commission and AstraZeneca over supplies. AstraZeneca says it has production problems in Belgium and the Netherlands. The Commission insists doses manufactured in the UK must make up the shortfall. This morning, the European Commission published a redacted version of their contract with AstraZeneca. It states AstraZeneca shall use its best reasonable efforts to manufacture the vaccine at sites including the United Kingdom, and suggests the company agreed to produce doses for the EU from 4 sites, including 2 in the UK.
A couple of sites started working with the Oxford University quite some time ago and have had a long time, a number of months now, to refine their understanding of the process and their knowledge. And people don't understand the manufacturing vaccine is extremely complicated. It's not like doing an orange juice.
The EU has also introduced vaccine export controls. From tomorrow, drug companies in the EU will have to notify their country's authorities what they're exporting and to whom. Companies that aren't meeting doses promised to the EU could be blocked from exporting to places like the UK. That could potentially mean supplies like these Pfizer vaccines heading across from Brussels could be affected.
We're not protecting ourselves against any specific country, and we're not in competition or in a race against any country. The only race we're in is against this virus.
Critics say the move is politically driven to distract from the EU's own vaccination pace being considered too slow.
Stop messing around with supply chains along the way to try and make a political point, to try and satisfy your communities and the population that you're doing everything possible, because you are undermining, one, the distribution, the supply chains, and actually creating a potential storm.
So alongside these speedy scientific developments comes vicious vaccine politics.
Well, those new export controls on vaccines introduced by the EU also have an impact on the border on the island of Ireland. Well, let's go over to our political correspondent Liz Bates in Westminster. Liz.
Yes, so political tensions over the supply of the COVID vaccine have been growing over the past few days between the European Union and the UK. But today they have ramped up significantly, and that is because, as you just heard, the EU have brought in new export controls. Now, it's only over the last few hours that it's become clear that those export controls could have significant political implications on the island of Ireland. And that is because under the Brexit agreement, goods can still move freely between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. But under these new vaccine regulations, the EU has triggered what's known as Article 16. It's an emergency measure. It was never intended really for use, certainly not within the first month of Brexit. In practice, what it now means is that the vaccine will not be able to move over the Northern Irish border. And tonight there's been a strong reaction from Northern Ireland's First Minister, Arlene Foster.
This is an incredibly hostile and aggressive act by the European Union bloc. They are trying to stop the supply of a vaccine designed to save lives into the United Kingdom. For years, we were told after the European Union referendum vote that there couldn't be a hard border on the island of Ireland. And in one fell swoop, they have put that hard border in place.
Arlene Foster also called today for the UK government to essentially retaliate by triggering Article 16 themselves. We have had reaction tonight from Number 10. They've said that Michael Gove has spoken to the European Commission President to express the UK's concern over the lack of notification. They also said that they will be carefully considering next steps.
Liz Bates, thanks very much. Krishnan.
Well, Jill Russell worked as a civil servant for more than 2 decades at the Treasury and in Downing Street. She joined us regularly throughout the Brexit process and joins us now from West London. Jill, how shocking is this triggering of Article 16 in the Northern Ireland Protocol?
Well, we don't know yet what effect it will have in practice because, of course, at the moment, the EU is only asking companies to notify them that they're going to export rather than actually stopping those exports. But I think the worry about the triggering of Article 16 is there's a pretty high bar towards using Article 16. If you read this, it's a sort of safeguard thing that you use in the event of what are likely to be long-term economic or security or societal disruption. The government here has been under some pressure from the Democratic Unionists to trigger it because of some of the disruptions we've seen on GB Northern Ireland trade under the protocol, where the UK is administering this new border in the Irish Sea as a result of that protocol Boris Johnson signed up to. So there's already political pressure saying it's too disruptive, it's having an impact on lives in Northern Ireland. The UK government should be resorting to Article 16. Governments resisted that, but effectively the EU has now put the barrier very, very low. And I think that's a very unwise and quite inflammatory move by the EU in these circumstances.
I mean, it tells us something about the future tone of EU-UK relations, doesn't it? If they reach for, you know, the red button this early, it doesn't bode very well.
Well, I think we'll have to look and see what's going on in Europe. If indeed they're doing that, I mean, this is, I've just picked this off Twitter, so it's possible that they won't even confirm all of this. But assuming they do this, I think we have to look at what's going on in the EU. It's clear that the EU is under immense pressure over its performance, its relative underperformance compared to the UK on vaccine rollouts. So it's a very sensitive issue, and they're looking for ways of trying to deal with that. That's hence this export ban that they're potentially envisaging. And I think that's going to be quite controversial in itself before we get to the Northern Ireland thing. If they really did stop the Pfizer vaccines coming over to the UK, that would be quite bad. So it's partly them looking, frankly, as though they're flailing around. I think the Northern Ireland thing may just have been as a result internally with not enough thought of thinking, well, we can stop exports to GB, but actually we do need to do something else because for the purposes to avoid that land border in the island of Ireland, we have a different regime applying to exports and imports between the EU and Northern Ireland. So it may just have been some lawyer somewhere saying, well, to make that absolutely watertight, we have to trigger Article 16 as well. And it didn't really get enough political consideration of was that very wise to do. And we're in this sort of early, sort of slightly phony war stage of disputes here, and not yet a stable situation, I think, having had the deal only agreed.
Jill Rutter, thank you very much. Well, let's talk now about the vaccines development. Joining me is Professor Sir David Spiegelhalter, who's a non-executive director of the UK Statistics Authority and chairs the Centre for Risk and Evidence Communication at the University of Cambridge. He's also a key advisor on SAGE, the government's Committee of Scientists. We've heard a lot of percentages today talking about efficacy on these vaccines. Do the different numbers matter?
So, first of all, I must say I'm not on SAGE. I am on the website, but I'm not on SAGE.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I thought you were.
No, okay, that's fine. It's becoming almost routine, you know, these 5 effective vaccines, and we mustn't forget that this is an unbelievable achievement. It's quite extraordinary. We're enormously fortunate. And they do come up with slightly different numbers. This Novavax trial, UK trial, 15,000 volunteers, 89% efficacy. That means that if 100 people got ill with COVID, if only they had had this vaccine, only 11 would have got ill. And that's pretty impressive. There are variations. Most of them are, around 95%, 90%. AstraZeneca is around 70%, a bit lower. But actually, from a practical point of view, I don't think this makes much difference. And also, when we look across all the studies, the efficacy for preventing hospitalizations and severe disease and even deaths is likely to be much higher than even the efficacy for just preventing any symptoms.
Now, what about the German concerns about the data around the AstraZeneca vaccine? What can you tell us about that? From what you've seen, as to whether we should be worried about it at all. A lot of people in this country have had that vaccine. They're aged over 65 and they're thinking, well, why is it not good enough for the Germans?
Yeah, well, the Germans are a real outlier on this because the European Medicines Agency have today said they approve the AstraZeneca vaccine regardless of age. So they've gone against this German decision, which is really stands out as being different from what everyone else thinks. Okay, the AstraZeneca studies did not have that many older people in them, but all the other vaccines show no difference in terms of the efficacy across the age range. The AstraZeneca study has shown that in older people, there's a good immune response. So there's no evidence that it will do worse in older people. And the European Medicines Agency today has followed what we've decided in the UK, which is that it's fine across all age groups. So the German decision is the odd one.
Now, when it comes to efficacy, I think a lot of people are still a bit confused about precisely what it means. Does it mean that I have a 89% chance of being okay, or is it that 89% of people won't get the infection, or is it about getting it seriously? Could you just spell out what it means?
Okay, it's none of those at all. We have to think of it as a reduction in the risk of getting ill with the disease. So, as I said before, if you've got 89% efficacy in the Novavax vaccine, that means 100 people who would have got ill with COVID, if they had had the vaccine, only 11 would have got ill. So that's the way to think about it. It's nothing to do with your actual risk of getting ill. It's the reduction in the risk, the reduction in your risk of getting ill.
So how would you express that in terms of the remaining risk for people who've had it? Because again, people will then have to say, well, I've been vaccinated. What does that mean for my remaining risk for becoming ill from coronavirus?
Well, that's a good point. And of course, that depends on how much virus is circulating. If there's none around, your risk is zero. So it depends crucially on what's going on, your behavior, who you mix with, etc. But whatever the risk would be normally, it's reduced by 80–90% or so. So that's the point. That's the way to think about it. The absolute risk of getting ill with the virus will now be with the vaccine will actually be extremely low. but it depends on
David Spiegelhalter, thank you very much indeed.